The Man, the Moment, and the Machine. Edward L. Beach, Jr., and the Birth of the Nuclear Ocean. The Cold War did not begin with missiles streaking across the sky or armies clashing at borders. It began quietly, beneath the surface of the world's oceans, where men lived sealed inside steel hulls, surrounded by darkness, pressure, and silence. By the late 1950s, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a struggle, not just for land or ideology, but for invisibility. Whoever could move undetected, strike without warning, and disappear again would hold the ultimate advantage. It was in this hidden battlefield that a U.S. Navy officer named Edward Latimer Beach, Jr. would command a mission that permanently changed the balance of power beneath the seas. Edward L. Beach, Jr. was not a scientist, a politician, or a strategist working behind a desk. He was a submariner, one shaped by war, discipline, and experience earned in combat. Born in 1918, Beach entered the U.S. Naval Academy during an era when submarines were still considered dangerous, unreliable vessels. During World War II, he served aboard submarines in the Pacific, witnessing firsthand the claustrophobia, exhaustion, and lethal precision of undersea warfare. Those wartime patrols taught him a lesson that no classroom ever could. Survival underwater depended not only on technology, but on leadership under extreme psychological strain. After the war, many officers left the Navy, but Beach stayed. He watched as the world shifted from conventional conflict to nuclear standoff. The atomic bomb had ended World War II, but it had also introduced a terrifying new question. How could such weapons be delivered without warning or defense? Aircraft could be intercepted, missiles could be tracked, but submarines, if they could remain hidden long enough, offered something unprecedented. They could move silently, wait indefinitely, and strike without ever being seen. The problem was endurance. Traditional submarines still depended on surfacing for air and fuel, making them vulnerable. That limitation was about to disappear. The solution came in the form of nuclear power, championed relentlessly by Admiral Hyman G. Rickover. Rickover was infamous for his obsession with detail, discipline, and control. He believed that nuclear propulsion would free submarines from the surface forever, but only if commanded by men capable of handling the responsibility. Rickover personally selected officers he trusted, and Edward Beach became one of them. This was not an honor given lightly. Rickover rejected far more candidates than he approved. To him, a nuclear submarine commander needed not only technical competence, but moral strength. A mistake would not simply sink a ship, it could trigger catastrophe. By the end of the 1950s, the United States had already launched its first nuclear submarine, USS Nautilus, proving that nuclear propulsion worked. But proving it could change global strategy required something more dramatic. The Navy needed a demonstration so undeniable that no adversary could ignore it. That demonstration would come in the form of USS Triton, the largest and most advanced submarine ever built at the time. Unlike any submarine before it, Triton was powered by two nuclear reactors, giving it unmatched endurance and speed. And it would be commanded by Edward L. Beach, Jr. The mission assigned to Triton was codenamed Operation Sandblast. Its objective was deceptively simple: circumnavigate the globe entirely underwater, following roughly the same route as Ferdinand Magellan's 16th century expedition, but without surfacing even once. No submarine had ever attempted such a journey. No crew had ever lived underwater for that long without sunlight, fresh air, or contact with the outside world. Success would prove that nuclear submarines were not just weapons, but permanent mobile platforms capable of global reach. Failure would expose the limits of this new technology in front of the world. For Beach, the responsibility was immense. Triton was not just a ship, it was a message. Every mile traveled beneath the waves was a statement aimed directly at the Soviet Union. The oceans were no longer barriers, but highways. Yet the public would know almost nothing about the mission while it happened. There would be no radio broadcasts, no progress updates, no headlines. The crew would operate in total secrecy, aware that even a minor malfunction could turn triumph into disaster thousands of miles from help. Life aboard Triton was a test of human endurance as much as engineering. The submarine was a sealed environment, recycled air humming constantly through ventilation systems. The crew lived without natural day or night. their sense of time regulated only by artificial lighting and strict schedules. Meals, sleep, and work rotated endlessly. Personal space barely existed. Every sound mattered. Every vibration was monitored. In this environment, leadership was not optional, it was survival. Beach understood that morale could collapse long before machinery did. Navigation presented another silent danger. Triton would cross some of the most remote and unforgiving waters on Earth, including the South Atlantic and the Pacific. Underwater navigation relied on inertial systems that accumulated tiny errors over time. A small miscalculation could mean missing a navigational checkpoint by hundreds of miles. Surfacing to correct errors would invalidate the mission. Beach and his officers would have to trust instruments completely, knowing that the margin for error shrank with every passing day beneath the waves. Beyond technical challenges lay an unspoken fear: detection. While Triton was not on a combat patrol, the Cold War had no neutral spaces. Soviet forces monitored U.S. naval activity constantly. Being detected during the mission could expose routes, capabilities, and vulnerabilities. Triton had to remain a ghost, moving silently, leaving no trace, revealing nothing. Even accidental encounters with commercial shipping or fishing vessels could compromise secrecy. Every decision had to balance safety with invisibility. As Triton slipped beneath the Atlantic waves in February 1960, there was no dramatic farewell. Families watched the submarine disappear, knowing they would not hear from their loved ones for months. For the crew, the world above ceased to exist almost instantly. The ocean became their sky, the steel hull their entire universe. Edward Beach stood at the center of this closed world, responsible for every life aboard, and for a mission whose consequences extended far beyond the ship itself. Unbeknownst to the crew, Operation Sandblast was already reshaping strategic thinking in Washington and Moscow alike. If Triton succeeded, it would confirm that ballistic missile submarines could patrol indefinitely, hiding nuclear weapons where no radar could see them. Deterrence would no longer rely solely on visible strength. It would depend on the terrifying possibility of unseen retaliation. This shift would define the Cold War for decades to come. For Beach personally, the mission carried deeper meaning. He was not chasing fame or recognition. He believed profoundly in the responsibility of command and the necessity of preventing war through strength and preparedness. In later years, he would write novels and histories that revealed the emotional reality of submarine service. But at this moment, he was simply a captain guiding his ship through the unknown, trusting his crew and his training completely. As Triton pushed deeper into its historic voyage, the world above continued as if nothing had changed. Governments debated, civilians lived their lives. But beneath the oceans, a line had been crossed. Humanity had gained the ability to circle the planet in total secrecy, carrying unimaginable power in silence. And at the center of that transformation stood Edward L. Beach Jr., commanding the ship that proved the Cold War would be fought not in the skies, but in the deep. The long voyage through silence inside USS Triton as the world disappeared. As USS Triton moved steadily away from the Atlantic and into the vastness of the southern oceans, the novelty of the mission faded quickly. What remained was routine, unyielding, relentless routine. Watches rotated every few hours. The same narrow passageways were walked thousands of times. Conversations became shorter, more functional. For Edward L. Beach Jr., this phase of the voyage was the most dangerous not because of storms or enemies, but because monotony could dull judgment. In a nuclear submarine, complacency was a silent killer. The southern Atlantic tested both the submarine and its crew. Below the surface, powerful currents pushed against Triton's massive hull, forcing constant adjustments in speed and depth. The ship's dual nuclear reactors performed flawlessly, but their very reliability created a new burden: vigilance. Beach and his engineering officers knew that nuclear propulsion did not forgive error. Every gauge, every vibration, every temperature fluctuation was scrutinized. The reactors gave Triton freedom, but only so long as absolute discipline was maintained. Psychological strain crept in quietly. Without sunlight, the crew's internal clocks drifted. Some men slept too much, others too little. Small irritations, noise, cramped bunks, recycled air, took on exaggerated importance. Beach made it a point to walk the ship daily, speaking with sailors and officers alike. He listened more than he spoke. In the confined world of a submarine, a commander's presence could steady emotions or unsettle them. Beach understood that leadership at this stage meant preventing invisible cracks from spreading. Crossing into the waters off South America, Triton approached one of the mission's symbolic milestones. Passing near Cape Horn, the graveyard of countless surface ships in earlier centuries. Magellan's fleet had fought storms and mutiny here, exposed to the elements. Triton passed silently beneath the chaos, untouched by wind or wave. The comparison was not lost on Beach. This was the point of the mission, to demonstrate that geography, once humanity's greatest obstacle, had been rendered irrelevant by nuclear power. Navigation remained a constant concern. Triton relied heavily on inertial navigation systems, which, while advanced for their time, accumulated errors slowly but relentlessly. Periodic checks using celestial fixes were impossible without surfacing. Every calculation had to be precise. Beach and his navigation team double-checked figures, cross-referenced data, and planned conservatively. A single compounded error could place the submarine far from its intended track, undermining the historical legitimacy of the circumnavigation. As Triton entered the Pacific Ocean, the scale of the voyage truly set in. The Pacific was vast beyond comprehension, and beneath its surface lay deep trenches, unpredictable thermal layers, and acoustic conditions that could distort sonar readings. Though Triton was not actively evading enemies, the crew trained as if they were. Sonar operators listened intently, separating natural ocean noise from distant ship traffic. Silence was both shield and weapon, and Beach insisted it be respected at all times. One of the unspoken challenges of the mission was medical isolation. If a crew member became seriously ill or injured, surfacing and seeking help would jeopardize everything. The ship's medical officer was prepared for emergencies, but limitations were severe. Beach was acutely aware that every sailor aboard depended on collective health and caution. Risk-taking was discouraged. Even routine maintenance tasks were approached with heightened care. The success of Operation Sandblast depended on avoiding crises as much as overcoming them. Food, surprisingly, became a morale anchor. Meals were among the few daily events that broke monotony. The galley worked tirelessly to provide variety despite limited storage. Fresh food disappeared early in the voyage, replaced by canned and frozen supplies. Still, shared meals reinforced normalcy. Beach often ate with different sections of the crew, using these moments to gauge morale indirectly. In the closed ecosystem of Triton, small gestures of normal human interaction carried immense weight. As weeks passed, the crew became increasingly detached from the world above. News from the surface was minimal and delayed. Political tensions, crises, and events unfolded without them. This isolation was intentional. It was also revealing. Triton demonstrated that a nuclear submarine could operate entirely outside the rhythms of surface life. For strategists, this was a revelation. For the crew, it was disorienting. Beach balanced operational focus with reminders of purpose, reinforcing why the mission mattered. Mechanical reliability was tested continuously. Pumps, turbines, and electrical systems ran nonstop. Preventive maintenance became a daily ritual. The engineering department operated with quiet intensity, knowing that failure deep underwater offered no second chances. Beach trusted his engineers implicitly, but demanded rigorous reporting. Nothing was too small to mention. In the nuclear navy Rickover had built, transparency was survival, and Triton embodied that philosophy fully. As Triton neared the midpoint of its journey, a subtle shift occurred. Confidence grew, not reckless confidence, but earned assurance. The submarine had crossed oceans, endured weeks of isolation, and maintained perfect operational control. The crew began to understand that they were participating in something historic. Yet Beach resisted any relaxation of standards. He reminded his officers that most accidents occurred when success seemed assured. The mission was not complete until the last mile was traveled underwater. Passing through the Western Pacific, Triton skirted regions closely watched by both American allies and potential adversaries. Though the mission was not secret forever, its details were still classified. Triton avoided unnecessary proximity to shipping lanes and coastal areas. Even unintentional detection could provoke questions. Beach's orders were clear: complete the mission cleanly, quietly, and without incident. History would speak later. For now, invisibility was paramount. By the time Triton began its return toward the Atlantic, the submarine had been submerged for months. The crew had adapted fully to life beneath the sea. What once felt unnatural now felt routine. This adaptation was itself a strategic lesson. If men could live and function indefinitely underwater, then submarines were no longer temporary weapons. They were permanent extensions of national power, capable of waiting patiently through crises and wars alike. As Triton closed the final legs of its circumnavigation, the pressure intensified rather than eased. The mission's end was near, but its margin for error was unchanged. Edward L. Beach, Jr. remained vigilant to the last, knowing that history would not remember how close they came, only whether they succeeded or failed. The world still slept above the waves, unaware that beneath it, a revolution in warfare was nearing its quiet completion.
Completion, consequences, and legacy. How one silent voyage reshaped the Cold War forever. In early May 1960, after nearly 3 months beneath the surface, USS Triton approached the final stretch of Operation Sandblast. The numbers told the story before words ever would. More than 26,000 nautical miles traveled, an entire planet encircled without once breaking the surface. For Edward L. Beach, Jr., the last days of the mission were marked by a paradoxical tension. The hardest part was over, yet the danger remained unchanged. One careless mistake at the end could erase everything that had been accomplished. When Triton finally reached a point near where it had begun its voyage, the moment was deliberately understated. There was no cheering, no dramatic announcement over the ship's intercom. Beach allowed a brief acknowledgement, then ordered operations to continue as normal. Discipline did not dissolve into celebration. This restraint reflected the culture of the silent service. Submariners did not measure success by applause, but by quiet completion of duty. History would judge the mission later. For now, professionalism came first. Only after Triton surfaced and returned to port did the magnitude of the achievement become clear. The Navy revealed that a nuclear submarine had circled the globe completely submerged, a feat that no nation had ever achieved. The announcement was carefully worded, avoiding bravado while ensuring the message was unmistakable. Nuclear submarines were no longer experimental. They were mature, reliable, and capable of global reach. The oceans had become a permanent domain of strategic power. International reaction was swift, even if muted. Allies viewed the mission as reassurance that the United States possessed a credible and survivable deterrent. Adversaries understood the implication immediately. If one submarine could travel indefinitely underwater, then others could do the same while carrying nuclear weapons. Detection, interception, and prevention suddenly seemed far less certain. Triton's voyage did not escalate the Cold War in noise or spectacle, but deepened it profoundly. In the Soviet Union, naval planners and intelligence analysts took careful note. Publicly, there was little comment. Privately, Triton's success confirmed fears that the United States was pulling ahead in undersea technology and operational confidence. Soviet submarine development intensified in the years that followed, particularly in ballistic missile platforms. Operation Sandblast did not provoke immediate confrontation, but it accelerated an arms race that would play out silently beneath the oceans for decades. For nuclear strategy, the consequences were transformative. Submarines armed with ballistic missiles, SSBNs, emerged as the most survivable leg of the nuclear triad. Unlike bombers or land-based missiles, they could not be easily targeted or destroyed in a first strike. Triton had proven that endurance was no longer a limiting factor. A submarine could remain hidden, mobile, and lethal for months at a time. Deterrence now depended on uncertainty, the enemy never knowing where retaliation might come from. Edward L. Beach, Jr. was promoted and honored, but he never sought the spotlight. He understood that Triton was a transitional ship, a demonstration platform rather than a frontline weapon. Its true value lay in what it proved possible. Future submarines would be quieter, smaller, and more lethal. Yet none would carry the same symbolic weight as Triton's voyage, the moment when nuclear power and human endurance fused into a new form of warfare. Beech's later career reflected his dual identity as both warrior and historian. He wrote extensively about submarine warfare, including novels that drew heavily from real experiences. Unlike many fictionalized accounts, his writing emphasized responsibility, restraint, and the moral weight of command. Having lived inside the machinery of nuclear deterrence, Beech understood its paradox. Peace depended on the credible ability to destroy, exercised by men who hoped never to use it. Operation Sandblast also reshaped how submariners were trained and selected. Psychological resilience became as important as technical skill. Triton's crew had demonstrated that humans could adapt to prolonged isolation without collapse, but only under disciplined leadership. Modern submarine doctrine still reflects these lessons. The emphasis on routine, transparency, and mental stability traces directly back to missions like Triton's. As the Cold War intensified through the 1960s and 1970s, nuclear submarines became constant, unseen participants in global crises. During confrontations like the Cuban Missile Crisis, submarines lurked beneath the waves, their presence unknown but decisive. The world's survival increasingly depended on calm decisions made in silence, far from public view. Triton's voyage had shown that such deployments were not only possible, but sustainable. The irony of Triton's achievement is that its greatest success was invisibility. The submarine did not fight, fire weapons, or confront enemies. It simply endured. In doing so, it altered the logic of war. Strength was no longer measured by visible force alone, but by the ability to remain hidden indefinitely. This shift made conflict both less likely and more terrifying. Peace rested on the knowledge that destruction could come from anywhere at any time. Edward L. Beech Jr. retired from the Navy with a reputation for integrity, intellect, and steady command. He had seen warfare evolve from torpedoes and depth charges to nuclear standoff. Few individuals bridged that transformation so completely. His life embodied the Cold War's central contradiction, preparing endlessly for a war that could never be allowed to happen. Today's nuclear submarines are far more advanced than Triton, yet their mission remains fundamentally unchanged. They patrol in silence, unseen and unacknowledged, forming the backbone of modern deterrence. Every one of those patrols traces its lineage back to the moment Triton proved that the oceans could be mastered without surfacing. Technology has evolved, but the principle established in 1960 endures. In the end, Operation Sandblast was not about conquest or dominance. It was about permanence. It marked the moment humanity accepted that the deepest parts of the planet would forever be tied to the most powerful weapons ever created. Edward L. Beech Jr. commanded that moment with restraint, discipline, and quiet resolve. Beneath the waves, without spectacle or sound, the Cold War reached a new depth, and the world has lived in its shadow ever since.